Hi there, Dream Traveler's Quest. This is the second book and it's called The Curse of the Shadow Man. The other one was The Book of Light, and now this is The Curse of the Shadow Man. And look, there he is. Remember, he had to take somebody back with him next time? I thought it might have been Asher Brox, but it looks like it's a girl. So, The Curse of the Shadow Man, Chapter 1. Thao stared out of the window in first period language arts while Mrs. Bailey rambled on about the Revolutionary War and how George Washington led the country out from underneath British rule. Normally, he'd be enthralled with this lesson. He loved American history, and Mrs. Bailey's assignment to write a fictional story set in time period sounded like fun, but today he was stuck in his head. 2 weeks had passed since he'd entered the book and found the first seal. 2 weeks and not a word. Talia had promised to send a sign. When the sign came, he could go back into the other world and find the second seal. But Talia hadn't said what that sign would be, only that he would know it when it came. Maybe it had come and he'd missed it. Maybe it was here right now and he wasn't seeing it. Or maybe he dreamed the whole thing up. The idea was unsettling. What if his experience in the other world hadn't been real? But the white circle on his arm was real, so the other world had to be real too. The answer, Thao? Mrs. Bailey's voice interrupted his doubts. What? What is the answer? The whole class was staring at him. He had no idea what Mrs. Bailey had asked. He cleared his throat. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Mrs. Bailey crossed her arms and took a deep breath, disappointed. He knew he'd been distracted the past 2 weeks. Mrs. Bailey had clearly noticed. What was the name of George Washington's Secretary of the Treasury? He knew this one. Alexander Hamilton, he answered, glad for his dad's obsession with the Broadway musical based around the life of Hamilton. Correct. Alexander Hamilton was not only Secretary of the Treasury, but also a writer. Hamilton wrote... Mrs. Bailey continued to talk, but his mind drifted to the question of whether or not he'd missed Talia's sign. If so, he would never get the next seal. If he didn't get the rest of the seals, he would become the same fearful boy who'd been so afraid of the dark that he couldn't sleep without a night light. He didn't want to be afraid. He really liked his new unafraid of the dark self and was happy leaving the superhero nightlight stuffed behind his socks in the top drawer of his dresser. But it was more than that. It was Elian, and he wanted to go back. He swallowed and sat back, anxious. The bell rang loudly overhead and jerked him from his thoughts. He threw his binder and his pencil in his backpack and stood up from his desk. As he headed toward the door, Mrs. Bailey's voice stopped his exit. Thao, can you come here for a second? He sighed and spun on his heel to face his teacher. She stood in front of him, smiling. He knew she was about to ask him why he'd been so distracted lately. Are you okay, Thao? Is there something you need to talk about? No, I don't need to talk about anything. I'm fine. You sure? It's not like you to zone out. Once or twice I get, but it's been a recurring thing this past few weeks. You're not in trouble or anything. I just want to make sure everything's all right. I'm sure. Thanks, Mrs. Bailey. Everything's okay. I've just had my mind on other things. She looked at him concerned. The silence made him uncomfortable. Can I head to lunch now? He asked. Yes, you may. He turned, ready to leave this awkward situation. Oh, wait! He reluctantly looked over his shoulder. Will you take this to your father? She picked up a coffee mug from her desk with the words, Best Dad Ever, scribbled on the front. He recognised it as the Father's Day gift he's given his dad years ago. He and his mother had made it at one of those pottery shops the year before she died. He was kind enough to let me borrow it for the morning. I left my coffee sitting on the counter at home. The coffee in the lounge isn't the best, but it had to do. I can't start my day without a cup of Joe. Joe is like an American word for coffee. I'll go ahead and take it to him. See you tomorrow. Thao took the mug from Mrs. Bailey, finally managing to get into the hallway. He figured now was as good a time as any to find his dad. His dad was probably in the classroom where he stayed most of the time, avoiding Principal Brox, who was as much of a bully as his son Asher. Today, the quickest route would be to cut through the old elementary play school playground. He exited the double doors leading to the outside world and shivered. Who has kids eat lunch outside in winter? The yard was already filled with yelling students enjoying their freedom despite the cold. Since the cafeteria was being fumigated, for what he didn't know, students were encouraged to either bring a sack lunch or purchase a sack lunch from the school. Lunch was earlier than usual, too early, and outside for the rest of the week, messing up class schedules. On days like this, when their regular school day was interrupted by field trips, assemblies, or infestations in the cafeteria, he typically spent his time on the platform between the monkey bars and the metal slide of the old wooden playground. Once the school system had finished building the new elementary school across town, making room in the former building for more 6th and 7th and 8th graders, the playground had been abandoned, but not by Thao or Danny. Although they shared this hideaway, they respected the other's wish to be left alone. Danny usually kept to himself. Thao wondered if Danny's blindness was the reason he didn't talk to anyone. "And I will blind you over and over again." The Shaddakai's words replayed in his head, but he quickly pushed them away, remembering the truth. He was the son of Elion, and Elion couldn't be threatened. He checked his hideaway. Danny was there, alone. It was only a matter of time before Whitmore Christian Middle would tear down their one place of escape. As he passed the swings, dodging feet, he dared a quick glance over to where Annalie White normally sat. She was there, the prettiest girl in the whole school. He'd thought so since she walked into his kindergarten class as the new girl. For the past 6 years, he'd watched her, wishing he had the courage to tell her how pretty she was, or at least talk to her. But he knew that day would never come. She was way out of his league. Annalie sat on the picnic tables with a few of her friends, reading some teen magazine with the image on the cover of a girl gripping an ice cream cone with one hand and holding a tube of lipstick in the other. She laughed. He loved her laugh. It wasn't dainty, rather it was full and contagious. Her blonde hair seemed to glow in the morning sunlight, and her eyes were deep green like the lake where he'd met Elion. She suddenly looked his way. Was she looking at him? Of course not. Why would she? He quickly lowered his head and picked up his pace. Distracted, he ran into another student. Before he knew it, he was shoved to the frozen ground. The coffee cup rolled out of his hands. "Watch it, maggot!" He would know the sound of Asher Brox's voice anywhere. Asher singled him out and made an example of him at every opportunity he had. A chill ran down Tao's back. Thao snatched up the coffee cup, held it close, and looked up to see Asher and 3 of his goon squad standing next to him, scoffing. "World's best dad," Asher snickered. "Such a baby. You're going to give that to your pathetic father." He spat in Tao's direction and then moved on, eyes on another prize. Annalise. The girls closed their magazine and ceased their giggling, watching Asher's approach. "Hey there, Annalie," Asher said, pulling up in front of her. "I was thinking you could go to the dance with me tonight." The Whitmore Christian Middle Snowball was a big deal at their school, especially to 6th graders who were now old enough to put in a sweaty gymnasium with awful music and dance around for 2 hours while their parents watched on the sidelines. He hated the idea, but even more he hated hearing Asher ask Annalie. Thao didn't know how to talk to her, much less ask her to go to some silly dance, but she absolutely couldn't go to the dance with Asher. "Anyone but Asher," he whispered, slowly pushing himself to his feet. "Thanks, but no, I'm going with my friends." "No?" Asher snapped. "Sorry." "You're saying no to me? You do know who I am, right?" Everyone knows who you are, she said. I bet your dad would let you stay after school and help us decorate if you want. Her friends giggled. Teo and most likely everyone watching the exchange between the two knew that Asher would never agree. Asher stared in disbelief and then frowned. Whatever. I didn't want to go with you anyway. I mean, have you looked in the mirror lately? What do you think, guys? My grandma's better looking than her, one sneered. Uh, how do you spell ugly? I think it starts with a an and ends with a lee. Another joined in. Teo watched as tears flowed down her cheeks. Asher and his goons cackled like a pack of hyenas. The rest of the students were silent, holding their breath, with eyes locked on Annalee. She jumped off the picnic table and ran toward the school. He wanted to run after her to make sure she was okay, but he didn't have the nerve. She probably didn't even want his help. Why would she want help from someone she didn't know existed? Besides, Asher would probably kill him if he saw him going after her. Teo headed in the opposite direction toward the school and his dad's classroom. He stepped through the door, took a seat at one of the desks, and pulled out his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Hey, Dad. Hey, buddy. Not eating outside today? Nah, Mrs. Bailey gave me your mug. Oh, yes, she didn't have one. Yeah, she told me, he said, and then he sighed. What's up with you lately, Theodore? You seem more down than usual. Asher made Annalee cry on the playground. He basically called her ugly in front of everyone. He took a bite of his sandwich. Strawberry. His dad always made his favourite. Oh no. I have her older sister in class this year. Sweet girls. Maybe you should teach her how we deal with bullies. Just stay invisible. Avoid trouble. Yeah, maybe. He bit his lip. Maybe this was the time to talk with his dad about Elion and how Elion had taught him that he didn't have to be afraid. He had wanted to tell him so many times these past 2 weeks, but once again he held back. Hey, so I have a joke you'll like, his dad said. He loved jokes. What kind of car does a Jedi drive? Before Teo could respond, his right shoulder began to burn. He looked down at his sleeve of his black t-shirt. His heart jumped. Light was shining through his shirt. The circle on his arm was glowing brightly. How? Was this the sign? When he looked up to see if his dad noticed, Stokes, the fluffy white roosh from the other world, was sitting on his dad's desk with a giant smile spread across his face. Teo blinked, stunned. Teo? Stokes. See? What? His dad said. No, that's not it. The answer is Toyota. Yes? Get it? Because Yoda was a Jedi. Toyota? Teo glanced at his dad. He couldn't see Stokes. He forced a chuckle at the joke. Good one, Dad. Well, thanks for the courtesy laugh. Stokes surveyed the room, mouth gaping. This is amazing. I've never been to this world. Stokes pointed to a stapler. What is that? Teo shook his head at Stokes. Son, what are you looking at? Nothing. Nothing at all. I think I'm actually going to head back for lunch outside now, Dad. Thanks for the talk, Dad. Are you sure? It's a bit chilly today. Button your coat. What is this? Stokes asked, poking at the roll of tape and then at some paper clips. Shiny sticks? I really should be going, Dad. He hoped Stokes would pick up the hint. They all needed to leave, but the Roosh was too distracted by all of this world's gadgets. I want to look at all this stuff. So pretty, so smooth. What's this? He sniffed a bottle of glue and frowned. Teo cleared his throat. I'm leaving now. Fine, I'll come. Stokes flew past him, plopped to the floor and waddled out into the hallway. Bye, Dad. Are you sure you're not coming down with something? His dad asked. I'm fine. Promise.